Hey everybody, Travis here, and looking forward to today talking about Joby's eVTOL chargers. Joby has developed their own in-house proprietary system called the GEACS system, and that stands for the Global Electric Aviation Charging System, GEACS. And they built this out of necessity as they had started out using some of the off-the-shelf options out there, such as CCS, but quickly realized that they needed to have a more robust solution for their system to be able to handle both from the charging side of things, but also from the data management side of things. And before touching on the charging infrastructure, we'll give a quick recap about the Joby batteries that, of course, are crucial in the charging infrastructure that Joby will be using. And there's nobody better to talk about the Joby battery system than John Wagner, who's a longtime Joby veteran, but also prior to working at Joby, he was a longtime Tesla veteran and of course led the powertrain system that has been behind the Model S, which of course has led to all the further success of the Joby vehicle fleet. So without further ado, here's John giving some quick highlights on the Joby batteries.
So obviously the Joby aircraft's all electric and the battery's at the heart of that system. So in the plane, we got about twice the energy of a typical electric car, just to calibrate. This is the battery module. And in the plane, we've got 28 of these. That makes up the full battery system. Why do we talk about a module? Why is there 7 in a pack? This is all about the overarching safety concept of the airplane. And that is anything that could fail, we're going to continue safe flight and landing. And you can look at some of these tiny details that I love. The whole thing is laser welded together, completely enclosed, so that if there is any failure inside, we've contained it. On the line, we bring in these automotive battery cells, but we do everything after that. And it's really about thermal management, keep these things cool. Lightweight, high energy batteries is a technology that had to exist before we could even really think about an electric aircraft. And we're entering into a new age of aviation.
So obviously John talked about a lot of the key features there, but he did also talk about details, and details of course matter. That's something that Joby is consistent with throughout everything that they do. And moving to what they figured out with some of those details as they've gone through the multiple iterations of trying to find the best system to be able to charge those batteries, as John was speaking about. And we can flip over here, and this is a screenshot from a video from the Fair companies, and I'll put a link to this in the description because it's a great video. And this is back at the end of 2022. And you'll see another Joby veteran, and this is Edward Stilson. He's been at the company for over 13 years. And where he is describing here from this photo is the previous version of what Joby was charging their vehicles with. And this is pre-GEACS, obviously. But you will notice here that they're using a CCS style adapter and charger. And then they had to also have these other adapters that were used for coolant. And then, of course, those cables and conduit go back into the charging infrastructure. But when Joby started out, they of course were utilizing the technology that was there. Joby is a smart vertically integrated company where they will only bring it in-house if they cannot find a better solution off the shelf, as obviously that will be most productive for saving both capital, but also time and resources as they work day in and day out. And they have been over the last 16 years towards certification. And as Edward is pointing to these things here, you'll also see that there's a lot of different cables that were required, these coolant tubes. It wasn't the best solution. And so Joby had to come up with something else. And so here in Q4 of 2023, you'll see that Joby made public more information about the GEACS charging system. And at that point of time, they had already flown 30,000 miles with full-scale S4 aircraft and eVTOL configuration. And with all that knowledge and data that they had from all of those flights to develop the GEACS system. And of course, as you'll see here, the GEACS system is not just based in Marina, but also at Edwards Air Force Base, as Joby had delivered multiple aircraft now, but at that time was the first aircraft that they delivered to Edwards Air Force Base, which was November 5421 Alpha. And I'll put also a description here for anybody who is more adept with some of the electrical engineering side of things, or just broadly about interested about some of the more detailed components. But Joby has not just put out, that they are doing this thing. They have open sourced this and plan to, as their adapter and configuration of GEACS is specific to the S4, but the technology itself, that they hope to be a charging standard across any electric aircraft that's used in advanced air mobility, to be able to utilize as well, because it offers quite a few substantial benefits versus using some of the current technology, such as the CCS technology. So here we had a great bit of news at the end of 2025, and Robert Rowland, who is the GEACS lead at Joby for their charging team, had an interview with SkyZero Aviation. And if you haven't seen this yet, you absolutely must, if you're interested in Joby, but also in some of the details and ins and outs of how they're actually going to be able to operate their aircraft, not just from charging, but also from the infrastructure side of things. And a quick note to highlight as well that you'll see over here is that Joby made a very cognizant decision about why they needed to find a better solution than CCS, and one of which was about the charging infrastructure isn't just going to be about power, but also as an electric aircraft. And Joby in particular has been very smart and developed their own software that both handles from the aircraft side of things, but also pilot management, guest management, but also charging management and thermal management of the batteries and the charging infrastructure. And so related to the data side of things, Joby decided that CCS was not going to be robust enough for what they were looking to do. And as you'll see, CCS uses power line communication for their data transfer, and that's roughly 1 megabit per second. And Joby needed something that was orders of magnitude more powerful. So in their GEACS charger, they have a 2.5 gigabit per second connection. And again, that's almost 2,500x faster. So you understand that Joby's vehicle is going to be able to handle much more in terms of data offload. And Robert will talk about that at some points, but you will see that the CCS adapter really is not going to be able to handle what the future of eVTOL aircraft is going to need from both the charging side of things, but also data management as well. So here we'll click over to learn a little bit more about Robert, how he became the lead of GEACS at Joby, and you will understand quite the background behind Robert, extremely smart individual. And without further ado, here is some background on Robert.
Lab, where I got to see some very early days R&D efforts that General Motors was doing in the electric vehicle space. And then I was also, during my schooling, part of the University of Waterloo Formula SAE team for the electric side. So we were designing and building an electric race car as students to compete in a student competition. And that's where I initially made a lot of connections in the EV world and really got my feet wet working on all aspects of designing and building electric vehicle systems, and kind of fell in love with that. When I graduated, I went and did some other things for a while. I designed pitching machines for Major League Baseball, and I went to work for Apple eventually, but then felt the pull back to the EV engineering world. And one of my close friends from the Waterloo Formula SAE team, Alex Bondarenko, heard me grumbling about being bored with other work and asked me to come back to Joby to work on charging.
So as you'll see, Robert has quite the background there. And as you'll notice, he, along with many other Joby team members, have quite a pedigree of both the education that they've gone through, but the tangible real world work that they have done, in Robert's case, in college, developing some of the formula vehicles that were used for electric racing. So as we look to this next video that I'm going to include, you'll see Robert talking that not only was Joby interested in how can they make the integration of the aircraft and the charging infrastructure better versus systems like CCS, but also how do you deploy those in the real world? And a key thing about how Joby is differentiated themselves from other iterations of electric aircraft is that Joby's aircraft can actually vertically take off and land. So Joby does not need runways. They don't need any type of infrastructure really outside of a small landing area. But with that, of course, you can't have chargers sticking up out of the ground or other infrastructure, cables running all over the ground. You need another option. And so Joby was very clever in building their GEACS system so that it could be modular. And Robert speaks to some of those specifics that you'll see, and we will listen to those now.
Yep. So we're taking a modular approach where there is a dispenser, which the actual charge cable pops up out of, that has to be at the landing site or wherever the aircraft taxis into for charging. And in that dispenser, there's a core module which houses all of the functional bits to do with the charging process. And then we package that core module into different configurations to be reused at many different sites. So we're going to have a mobile solution that's on wheels and you can drag it around. And we've also got a solution that goes under the ground such that you can have a completely flat landing deck. And then when you need the chargers, it pops up out of the ground and you can connect it to the aircraft very quickly and efficiently.
So as you listen to Robert talk about some of these different things that they've thought of at Joby, you'll understand that, again, Joby has played a game of 3D chess, as they have not only built a world-class vehicle, but they are on their way to building the charging infrastructure that will be able to handle the future of air taxi operations, in which they plan to not have tens or hundreds of vehicles, but thousands of vehicles as we get into the 2030s and beyond. So hopefully this was helpful. I'll put some of the videos here linked in the description. Hopefully everybody enjoyed. See you next time.